He turns to camera and goes, "This mission, it just got a hell of a lot more impossibler."
So after 30 years worth of movies, the Mission Impossible franchise is finally coming to an end with the final movie, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. It touts itself as an emotional and action-packed finale for one of the most iconic franchises out there, and one of my personal favorite action franchises. So, does it live up to the hype? Does it send off the MIF team and Ethan Hunt in a good way, or does it fall flat? Let's find out in our spoiler-free review of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. So, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, which was originally called Dead Reckoning Part 2, I believe, because they had Part 1 right before this, they decided to change the name of it. And to be completely honest, I thought the last movie that they made wasn't the best. I thought it was pretty good, but in relation to all the others, I thought it was pretty lackluster. They got a little convoluted, and this one follows the events of the last one, as per usual. So I was kind of laughing because on IMDb, they described the movie as, "Our lives are the sum of our choices. Tom Cruise is Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning." Probably the worst, most non-descriptive synopsis for a movie. But to go to Google for a more accurate depiction of it, Ethan Hunt and the IMF team race against time to find the Entity, a rogue artificial intelligence that can destroy mankind. So it's pretty interesting that this one, obviously it has a villain, but this one is actually centered around this sort of entity, this AI that's all powerful, all seeing, to the point where it's actually manipulating what people see and how people act. So much so that it even had a cult following as well. And the whole world is in shambles, basically. And overall, I mean, again, like in most of these movies, the fate of the world is in pretty much Ethan Hunt's hands, as usual. And this is no different. Obviously, you know, the scale is much grander, but I feel like in every single movie, they are just trying to save the planet, basically, from mass destruction or some massive nuke or something like that. So this one still falls in line with that. So let's start off with the casting first off. So we have a few familiar faces from the previous movie and from the past couple of movies. Simon Pegg, Hayley Atwell, and Pom Klementieff, sorry if I completely butchered that, return from the last movie, along with the long-running character of Luther, played by Ving Rhames, and of course the main titular character Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt. So that's pretty much the main crew that we have going on, with an addition of a couple of throwback characters that actually come back for this final movie. And I actually thought that some of the callbacks were pretty funny because they were very specific. One particular character, which appears in one of the first Mission Impossibles, if not the first one, actually makes an appearance once again. It's a little random, but I did find it kind of charming in its own way. But going back to the team, I think one of the coolest things about the Mission Impossible franchise is how many characters they've sort of introduced and how many different groups they've had throughout the films. I think that having that sort of camaraderie with some comedic timing elements, it's always very important in action movies like that. And in the last couple of more modern Mission Impossibles, they've always had a sort of interesting dynamic between the team members, and they've kind of cycled through them. Some have died in the franchise, others are still here, you know, like Simon Pegg as Benji and stuff like that. So, you know, it's an important part of it, and one of the ground roots of Mission Impossible has always been this idea of this elite team. And to be completely honest with you, while I do like, you know, Hayley Atwell as Grace and Pom Klementieff as Paris, she only speaks French in the movie, which I found interesting. Even though I do like them, and obviously Benji, honestly I thought that the other movies before that, for example, Ghost Protocol and Fallout, had more of an interesting dynamic within the team. It felt a little more charismatic, felt a little more interesting and fleshed out. This group in particular is not bad by any means, I just think that it wasn't as interesting as the other ones. But let's go to Tom Cruise. So he has always been the master of blockbusters in my opinion. He really knows how to make a movie, and one of the most important things to this franchise is these spectacles, these larger-than-life stunts that he does himself at the age of 62. It's crazy, and I've always thought that he was a great actor, and you could tell he really has a lot of passion for this particular project, especially since he's been a part of it and one of the biggest things in his career for a long time. Obviously, he's made a lot of movies and had a lot of acclaim, but Mission Impossible has been something in his career almost from the very beginning, from back in 1996 when the first one came out. So it's been a long time with this character. So giving it a send-off, I could tell that Tom Cruise puts a lot of heart and passion into all these projects, and you can really feel that between just the director and all the people who work on the movie, along with the actors that help with Tom Cruise. I think that you can tell they're all very much into the project. So that really shows on the screen. There's a sort of emotional impact that has, and it's more of a spectacle as well in certain aspects. I think that when it comes to these big set pieces, you expect to see them in these movies. Having Tom Cruise actually up there doing them, and even with the popularity of AI and stuff, you can really tell when something is done practically and in real. There's certain set pieces in this particular one and all the others where you can tell this is actually something that you're seeing happen in real life and not using green screen or CGI or AI or whatever you want to use to sort of replicate that, not actually do. No, he's actually up there and you can tell, which is really cool. At least we're at that moment right now. I don't know how it'll be 10 years from now. AI keeps getting better and better. Funny enough, very ironic, since one of the main themes in this movie is AI, the entity, if you will, and manipulating what people see. So that was very ironic in its own way. But yeah, I mean, right now it's awesome to see these stunts happen. So let's talk about the stunts. How are the set pieces? How's the action sequences? You know, that's one of the main things, if not the main thing, that people come out and see these movies for. So how are the action sequences? I'd say they're very good for the ones that they have. In my personal opinion, they were lacking on some of the big set pieces. You know, every single movie has one or two huge set pieces, and this one has two set pieces, if we're being technical with it. One really awesome one, honestly one of the best ones I've seen in this franchise. The second big action set piece, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, they keep showing it in the commercial, but yeah, that scene is absolutely awesome, and you need to see it on the big screen if you're going to see it for that. There is another set piece that happens earlier on in the movie, so really two big set pieces. The first set piece, action set piece, again, I'm kind of keeping it vague, but there's one underwater. Personally, that was very underwhelming, and I wouldn't even put that in the top 10 stunts that they did for all the movies, to be honest. That was very lackluster to me. I thought there wasn't much going on. It could have been so much cooler, but it was missing that wow factor that all the other stunts have. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. But the second one, I would say, makes up for it because it's really awesome. And in between that, obviously, there's a lot of, fighting, a lot of gunfights and stuff like that. A lot of hand-to-hand combat. That's all really well done. I think that the choreography is really cool. A lot of the supporting actors in the movie, really, you could tell they're doing their own stunts, and it really all looks good. So I do like the sort of action set pieces with that, smaller fight scenes, and obviously, Tom Cruise running and stuff like that. We see memes about that, but yeah, of course, he is totally doing his classic Tom Cruise run down the street in other areas, always running for his life. And a couple of, explosion scenes here and there. So, the typical action stuff, but the big set pieces, there's really only two. And, unfortunately, since this was the last one, they really needed to go all out with it. And I thought they kind of played it safe in a way, even though, that's laughable considering the dangers within the stunts. But, in terms of movies go, I think they played it a little safe in terms of the actual stunts they decided to do. I thought there was cooler, better things they could have done with the underwater sequence, and it was very quick too. And during these action sequences, the music is great. I think it's really adds a lot to it. They added a little suspenseful stuff in there, and then the action sequences pop off with these big orchestral epic tunes as well, and that adds a lot to it as well with the imagery. So that was really cool. In terms of the acting, before I go to other things, I think that the acting from everyone is very good. I think there's a couple of questionable sequences in it, but overall the acting is very solid from everyone, including Tom Cruise, of course. A lot of supporting actors as well. We have a lot of different people in this movie. Nick Offerman's in it. Trammell Tillman, which plays Mr. Milchick in Severance, if you've seen that, is in the movie. Holt McCallany. And I thought thought that Esai Morales, which plays the villain in the last movie and in this one, Gabriel, does a pretty solid job for the time screen that he has. They don't really give him too much screen time, which was pretty interesting to me. And a couple of other reoccurring people like Angela Bassett as the president and Henry Czerny as Kittridge. He also makes an appearance again. So yeah, we have some reoccurring people, but everyone does a pretty solid job. And not as much comedic relief as the other movies, but I don't mind that. I think this one, since it is the final movie, they do want to give it more of a send-off as well. So a couple of things that I didn't like about it. The main thing I'd say about this one is there's a couple of scenes that they could have just cut out completely. I think the runtime, we're 10 minutes off of 3 hours, so this movie's 2 hours 49 minutes. I think they could have cut off several different things in it and added more interesting action set pieces. They could have cut out at least 30 minutes of, things that don't really make a difference. It was several moments I'm like, okay, they didn't need to show that and stuff like that. And I think that even though this one's big and epic and there's a lot of interesting moments in it, they really could have cut out a couple chunks off this movie and made it a little shorter and even replace it with a better action set piece. One of the big criticisms that I heard people saying was that the movie was boring and that there was a lot of talking sequences in it. Honestly, that didn't really bother me too much, besides the point I just made where they could have cut out some scenes. But from the overall storyline and the plot line, I didn't think that it was boring by any means. I think that setting up the set pieces or setting up their plans is not a bad thing. And I think that there's a lot of things going on in the middle of the story as well. It almost gets too convoluted for its own good at times. This is definitely one of those things where the more you think about it, the more you find certain things that don't really make sense. But overall, I don't think the movie was boring by any means. I think that it is entertaining, and then when the big action sequences get going, it really is an exhilarating ride. So I personally didn't mind that at all. And then finally, my last point that I didn't like, again, going back to it, they needed a better action set piece. This is the final movie. Send it off with a bang. They did that with one amazing stunt. Awesome stuff. Edge of your seat. Heart pounding, but they needed another one in there as well, and that would have really been the cherry on top to send off this series in a good way. But overall, I think this is a pretty decent send off, some pretty emotional moments in it, some really clever callbacks to the previous movies. It really shows and puts in perspective how long this series has been out. So yeah, it's crazy to think that it's over. I one of my favorite franchises in terms of action movies. This has probably been one of the most consistent ones. There's 8 of these, and I could honestly say that all of them, except maybe 1 or 2, are not great. But yeah, really a consistent series, and it's sad to see it go, but I think this is a pretty solid send-off. Could have been better, honestly, but I think, again, for what it's worth, it's a very solid movie, and I would recommend seeing it on the big screen. So I'm giving this a very solid 8 out of 10. There was a lot more stuff I liked than stuff I disliked about it, and I did enjoy it and was entertained. So yeah, definitely a solid movie. Please let me know below if you saw it and what you think of it, and please hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with the latest videos just like this.